everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Female Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Christa Gurka, and we have another guest episode. I love guest episodes. I love them because it's not just me staring at the computer talking, like looking like a weirdo. But anyways, today we have Beth Adas, who is the CEO of Balance Yoga and Pilates in Glen Ellyn, right?
Mhm.
Illinois. So how far outside of Chicago is that?
Depending on traffic, 45 minutes or so.
Okay. And in which direction is it?
Western
West
suburb.
of, okay,
Yeah.
west of Chicago. I'm learning a little bit more about the Midwest because now my son's in Indiana and my other one's in Ohio. And I say this, I am a very intelligent person, but for pretty much my whole life, I thought that Illinois and Indiana were
Reversed.
flip-flopped in the state. And I went to college in Michigan, but I don't know why. I know it's really bad. So anyways, Beth, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your studio?
Sure. So my name is Beth. It's funny that you say CEO because I don't think about that, but owner of Balance Yoga and Pilates. We have been in existence for 11 years, but I purchased the studio 2.5 years ago and rebranded this a year ago. We used to be called Mindful Movements. Now it's Balance Yoga and Pilates. We obviously offer both yoga and Pilates in addition to aerial. And yeah, that's kind of my brief overview. I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for almost the amount of time that I've owned the studio. So that's a little bit of my story. I've been teaching yoga for about 3 years, and I'm currently going through a Pilates teacher training program right now. I'm about 9 weeks into it and actually just taught my first group class last week. So
Love it. Love it. Love it. So, okay. So let's backtrack because I think that you have a very interesting story in terms of someone who bought into a business. A lot of the people that I interview are founders. So they started and they were also like technicians for a long time and then they opened their business. So what was your life like prior to owning a business?
Yeah. Well, this was never in the plan. I mean, I've always actually been interested in a business, but I never thought it would be a yoga or Pilates studio. I've been practicing yoga for about 15 years. I started my first class when I was pregnant, when I was pregnant with my daughter, who is now 15. And I became a yoga teacher during COVID. I used to be a meeting and event planner. So needless to say, during COVID, my industry changed quite a bit in that arena. And I was bored and wanted to do something with my time. And I really love yoga, hair in my mouth. And I was passionate about trying to bring it to more people who struggled with difficult classes. I went through some health challenges, used to be a fast-paced flow person with yoga, and realized that I couldn't keep up in those classes anymore. And every time I went to a yoga class, no one showed me any options other than the prescribed formula that the teacher was leading. So I did my teacher training 200-hour during COVID, and it focused on more somatic healing, more gentle therapeutic approach to yoga, which was amazing, a huge part of my healing journey. And I kind of moved away from the meeting and event world at that same time, worked a little bit remotely, but as meetings were all remote at the time. And I was a long time client of the studio that I now own. So that's kind of how my path started.
And did you go through the teacher training at this studio that you were a client of? Oh, no. Okay.
The studio that I did my training with is based in Minnesota. And at the time, it was all online learning. So that's a little bit of some people in the yoga world would say, well, that's not a real training because you did your training online, which I would beg to differ. It was all we all were logged on to Zoom at the same time, and it was a really great experience for me. I'm still friends with some of the people I went through my training with.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I do roll my eyes at that a little bit because while I agree there's no substitute for in person, there's no reason you can't learn everything you need to learn online. And if one of the good things I think that came out of COVID was really opening people's eyes because they were forced to be in these situations to realize, oh, this is it's still a really great experience, and
Yeah,
you could curate a really good experience online.
you
So
can. I think it depends on the program, of course.
for sure.
But mine was a great
Yeah.
experience. And
It
at the
can be
time,
shitty just like everything else. In-person programs can be shitty too.
they
So
can. And at the time, my health was still a struggle, so it wasn't possible for me to be in a classroom setting
with other people.
every weekend with other people. So
Mhm.
this was win-win in all respects for
Yeah.
what needed.
Do you think that if COVID had not happened, do you think you would have gone down that road?
I don't think so because I mean I've been practicing yoga for so long and teachers at my studio would say to me, "Oh, you should become a
Hmm.
teacher." And I was like, "I don't want to teach yoga." Like to me it was sort of my place to go and not think and
Like your
just
outlet.
exactly. And so I
Hmm.
didn't want to take that away from it. So I kind of poo-pooed it. And I because my practice had changed a lot and I was never someone who could do headstands and I still can't
Hmm.
in the middle of class. And I had this idea that you have to be
Yeah.
good at yoga, which now I know is not the case, to be a teacher. And
Hmm.
I learned quickly when I went through my training that that's obviously not the case. There's a person out there for the type of class that you want to offer. And even more so, I think, with people who struggle with health issues and or are brand new to yoga at 65 years old and they want to start, but they show up at a class that moves quickly and they can't keep up. So that's something I'm really passionate about is making yoga available to all ages and levels.
Amazing. Yeah.
Mm,
That's something that we all learn, I think. You don't have to be the best practitioner. And most, at least in our Pilates training program as well, like I don't believe anyone can learn the advanced repertoire in six
no,
weeks or even 6 months for that matter.
yeah,
So we just want people to be able to teach it to
yeah,
other people, right?
mhm.
So, okay. So you go through your teacher training, and then what happens that you're all of a sudden like, I'd like to buy a business? How did that transpire?
Yeah, it was kind of a quick and fast story. So part of my yoga teacher training, we had to do a certain amount of community hours of teaching,
Hmm.
which was a great experience. So I went to the studio owners at the time of where I was practicing and the business that I now own, and I needed to teach, I think, 10 or 12 hours for free to class to the studio or to anyone that wanted to come. And they had a spot on the schedule, which was really lucky. I started teaching Thursday mornings at 10 a.m., which was a prime spot. And so I started teaching there. I did classes, for free in the beginning, and then I got lucky. They added me to the schedule. And so I was teaching there for about 6 months. When there's two women that used to own the studio, and we had a team teacher meeting, and they announced that they were going to close the doors if they didn't have someone that wanted to take over the business. And that was in mid February 2022, I think, and their lease was up May 1st. So it was quick
Okay.
that they were trying to
Yeah.
figure out what was gonna happen.
What
Um,
was that energy like when that
oh,
announcement was made?
it was awful, and I cried in the meeting, I cried when I got home. I mean, that studio, and still is, was a huge part of my life.
Hmm.
A it sounds cheesy, but it was a safe place, it was a haven
No,
for
yeah.
my practice, like, 5 days a week. I was always there, I knew all the teachers, I knew all the students. It was and still is a very close-knit community, and so I think everyone was just sad. I mean,
Yeah.
they
It's
had
like a
been in
part of your life is
yeah,
getting
that was
taken
gonna
away for
close. I
sure.
was like,
Yeah.
"Where am I gonna go?" Like, I couldn't even
Hmm.
imagine practicing somewhere else. So I came home from that meeting, and like, walked in the door, and my husband knew. I called him when I was on my way home. Like, I kind of had a sense that this was happening, and so I came home from the meeting, and I said to him, I have the stupidest thing to say, and you're gonna probably think I'm crazy, but I think I wanna buy the studio. He looked and I still remember the look on his face. He was like, "I think that's a great idea. Let's see what happens." He's like, "Just start, you know, finding out." So I did. I started
In your head at that time, like in your head when you're like, you leave the meeting,
uh,
because I'm assuming they didn't talk
no.
numbers or anything.
It
Okay.
was
So
very like, "Let us know if you might be
yeah,
interested," you know?
you leave the meeting, you go home. You had never bought or owned a business
Yeah.
before, correct? Okay.
And I was
So,
barely working at that time either because the meeting industry was still
right.
not really
So
fully
what are you in your head? I'm just curious, like, what in your head did you think was like, how would that work out? Like, did you think, oh, it's like going to be $1 million? It's going to be like $5? Like, what are you thinking at that point, not having done anything?
Yeah. I mean, really, I had no idea financially at all what it was gonna take. To me, it was I didn't want to see the doors close. I didn't want all
Okay.
the people that were sitting in that meeting to not have a place to teach, and I just kept thinking about all the clients and all the members that I knew, and where would they go to practice? I mean, and
Hmm.
especially then because a lot of studios had already closed. I mean, this beginning of 2022, we were out of it, but especially in Illinois, it was pretty
Tough, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, there was studios were closing, and we were the only local studio left that wasn't owned by a chain, if I remember, in Glen Ellyn. And it was me, I was like, I just couldn't imagine it closing, and I just thought that there was potential. There was more
Mhm.
opportunity for growth. I knew that they were struggling, but they survived COVID, which was huge in itself. Um, and the 2 women that owned it, I think they just were ready to move on. I think anyone that, as you know, anyone that's ran a studio during COVID, it's not
It
easy.
like takes your legs out from under you
Yeah,
sometimes, for
and
sure.
they were on different paths in life of where they wanted to go next, and when that happens, understandably so, you just don't have the same drive when you open the doors
Hmm.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I just thought that there was potential, and really it was more like, "I could do this," like, maybe I'll still do some meeting planning on the side a little bit, or and really my thought was, and my husband said, when we talked about it in the beginning, he's like, "Well, you can't lose money. Like, you have to at least break even every year."
Yeah.
That was, like, the thought when we first started the conversation.
Yeah.
Like,
And
maybe it would be a hobby.
yeah, some people say that too. And I'm always like, I mean, it's really hard work for it to be
Yeah.
like a
You
hobby.
don't
Now that you know that. Now that you know that.
yeah.
Okay. So you have this discussion with your husband and he's on board. He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." What happens next?
So I went back to them, the owners, and said I was interested. And there was another teacher also that I know well and who still teaches for me that was also interested. So at first it was the two of us that we were going to do it together.
Oh,
And there-
together. Okay.
Yeah. And there was a couple teachers that were potentially like interested in maybe investing or, so there was a group of us that got together. We had the financials, we started having some conversations. And then soon it became me and the other teacher, just 2 of us. And then we started having more conversations with the owner. They gave an asking price. I started doing more research. I had a lot of conversations with other studio owners. I just kind of started asking. I was in a couple Facebook groups for yoga instructors who there happened to be
Oh, okay.
studio owners in those groups. So I started having conversations with them. I started to learn what Pilates equipment was worth. um, so the dialogue kept continuing. I had conversations with the landlord because the lease was up. So I also needed to know that
First, they
I
would continue the
yeah,
lease. Yeah.
they weren't going to kick me out. But through the whole journey, from that first staff meeting and every step along the way, it sounds cliche, but it was like every door that was closed in front of me just kept opening. Like
Hmm.
it just kept flowing pretty effortlessly for the
Okay.
most part. A
Yeah.
little bit, till the negotiations a little bit maybe, but it just kept going. Like every opportunity just kept opening up, so we just kept moving forward.
The conversations kept right. The conversations kept going.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually this other teacher drops out of some sort, right?
She did. She, was going through some personal things and just decided that the commitment financially wasn't gonna be in her wheelhouse at that time, but she still teaches for me and is awesome, and I'm grateful to still have her on the team, but yeah, and in hindsight, and I think we both would probably say, I'm glad that it didn't work out that way. I think running a business with 2 people can be really hard because if you don't have the exact same vision, it can be challenging. And I think the previous owners would say that too. They're still really close today, but it's hard to have a business partner.
It is, especially when we know nothing about business,
Yeah.
right? So it's
They're both fumbling along.
yeah, both fumbling along, I think personalities are different. I think interests are different. Um, so it's tough, right? And now, so now you're both new business owners. You don't really know each other
No,
well.
we
Like, it's
didn't
not
really.
like you guys are like friends that are like, let's do this together. You didn't come
Yeah.
up with the idea together.
Yeah.
And at this point, you're barely like a baby teacher.
Yeah, and that was a huge thing for me, and honestly, sometimes to this day still is. I mean, we talk about imposter syndrome all the time in life. I had been teaching for 6 months, so I was like, "How can I run a studio when I barely, I'm just now learning how to lead a class?" So that was a big thing for me to kinda get over.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that was kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to go in business with her, because she is a very experienced teacher, and I was like, "Oh, this would be really great to have someone who really knows yoga." But it was okay. It
Didn't
didn't work
work out.
out, and it was
Yeah.
fine.
But she's still working with you, so it's
She is.
still,
Yeah.
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 Okay. So you're negotiating, you're going back and forth. When you're looking at the financials, do you have any idea what you're looking at?
No. I mean,
Okay.
no. I mean, I could see the revenue, I could see the
Hmm.
expenses, um, but I didn't really understand how that translated to the value of the
Hmm.
studio, what it was
Hmm.
worth. And like we've said too, if something's worth what someone's going to pay for it, right? No,
Yeah.
I had no idea. I just saw numbers and I
Right.
showed him to my account and he was like, "Yeah, that'd be a good hobby for you. Like, I don't think you should think about quitting your job to like, this isn't going to replace your income that you would
Right.
want to make."
So when you're looking at that at this point, in your head, are you thinking, okay, I'll go back to event planning and do this as a hobby just to keep the studio doors open? Or do you know from the beginning, like, if I do this, I'm going all in and I am going to make this my own and make this a full-time job? Like, are neither of those the thoughts that are going through your head?
I mean, I think in my head there was the hope that it could be that, but
Okay.
I didn't really know that it was possible. I mean, and especially at that time, like I said, studios were closing left and right. The studio had a solid client base, but it wasn't huge.
Hmm.
They were struggling to get people back after COVID still. Um, so it was like, oh, maybe that could happen, but it seemed quite honestly unachievable.
Hmm.
Just because I didn't know anything. I felt
Yeah.
clueless on what I was doing. My
As
husband would
most,
Yeah, my husband would probably say he would say now, he would be like, and he said this to me too, like, "I knew you would do it." Like, he had
yeah.
so much confidence in me, way more than I did. He's like, "If you decide you're gonna do something, you're gonna do it." Like,
Yeah.
I don't do
Yeah.
anything half-ass.
Now have full ass. You do
Yeah,
everything full
full
ass.
ass.
But also probably if you are relatively new in the industry as well, like it's not like you had people that you could look up to and be like, oh, oh, I know Krista from Pilates in the Grove and she has been able to create this, or I know so and so from Pilates Chicago. I'm not making them up. I don't know. And like they have a successful, like,
Yeah,
so you were just like, I don't have any evidence
yeah,
or a path to get there, which makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I was a really good meeting and event planner, and a lot of the
yeah,
skills that I used in that industry, I use today.
logistics. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also, especially at the time, now I could teach a Pilates class in a pinch, but I didn't teach Pilates, so there was a whole 'nother modality that I take Pilates, I've been taking Pilates for years, but I couldn't teach a class, so
Right.
it was also scary because there's no one of the previous owners was a Pilates teacher, so if there was a sub that needed to be had,
She could
she
jump in.
could teach the class, like,
Yeah.
that was a little scary too.
Yeah. Okay. So you agree to terms.
Mhm.
Was there anything, was it a flat like asset sale, or was there like any type of earn out that you had to like pay over time, or did they just basically sell the assets of the
Yeah.
business? And okay.
Yeah, there was a flat asset sale, but thankfully I had enough of resources to pay for it without taking out a significant loan. Um, and it went pretty smoothly in the negotiations. I think we both, all if all three of us were in the room right now, the hardest part was after or kind of right before the sale closed or right after when we were negotiating or figuring out all those unused packages
Packages.
and
Mhm.
things, which lesson learned now that I've done this before, I would have, I didn't have a great lawyer. My lawyer was great, but he wasn't someone that specialized in this
Yeah.
industry. So to think about all those nitty gritty details. So it got a little ugly between the three of us for a couple days, but we got through that.
Worked
We're
it out.
still all friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
But
is
it's
good.
hard.
I mean, any
Friendship
type
don't
of
work well.
yeah,
Yeah.
any type of, negotiation is always
Yeah.
tough. Like each party feels like they got shorted a little bit. I mean, I think that's negotiations, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So you buy the business, Mindful Movement at the time,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
And which was May of, or when was
May
it again?
1st, 2022, I became owner.
Okay. So May 2022. What's your first day as owner like?
I think it was on April 30th. So it was technically I wasn't the owner yet because I think that was a Saturday. Yeah, I think I assumed ownership on a Sunday, if I'm correct. But that Saturday, I was at the studio with the one of the owners is more the business side of it. So we were going over mind, body, and all those kind of logistics. And so it was almost my first day of ownership. And the aerial teacher injured herself in class that day. And so the previous owner drove her to the ER because her shoulder was
Oh my
dislocated.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was one of the first days. I was like, okay, I just bought a business and my lead aerial teacher is on her way to the hospital.
Okay, universe, I'm hearing you, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it gets better. Don't worry. There's more to the story.
I can't even imagine. Does the team like know you're in this process at the time? Like, do they
Yeah.
know this is happening?
Yes. Yeah. So we told the teachers a couple weeks before, and then an announcement went out to the studio community that I was going to be the new owner. So by that point, it was official. Like I was
Okay.
really actively involved in the business. I pretty much was working hand in hand with the business manager starting in the early to mid-April, which I'm grateful for. I mean, that was a huge benefit of
Yeah.
buying from two women that I knew really well because she, especially the woman who ran kind of all the financials and mind body and all that stuff, she really coached me step by step how to do so many things. I mean, and quite honestly, to this day, I still text her sometimes, just like some weird random question
Yeah.
that I can't quite figure out, or how did you handle this? Or, oh my God, I can't believe this one client did this, or whatever kind of a venting resource.
Yeah. 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 And so, okay, so you take over. One of your people has had to be taken to the emergency room. Like, what's that summer like? How was it? Was it well received by the clients and the
Yeah.
customers?
Yeah.
Did you ever have, well, I'm sure everyone has second thoughts at some point, but it's more like, were you nose to the grindstone, like full steam ahead? Or were you kind of like, okay, let's see like how these things kind of go?
Yeah. Well, my first goal was just sort of to learn the
Hmm.
business. I had in the back of my head, I had gotten an LLC, so I knew I eventually wanted to change the name. Um,
Okay.
but I didn't want to do anything in the beginning. I just wanted to run the studio and start to put my systems in place and kind of just figure things out. Um, so that summer was a little hectic, and especially about 2 to 3 weeks after, buying the studio, I was in the ER myself, and had emergency surgery
Oh
about
my gosh.
into studio ownership. So that also kind of waylaid me for a good several weeks until or more than that, until I was back to normal. So then I was working from home in my bed, recovered. It was not a great few
Start.
months of studio ownership. And then I got COVID after that. So the summer was kind of a shit show as an owner, trying to figure it out. My daughter was home from school. My husband travels a ton for work. So there was moments those first 3 months that I was like, I think I just made the stupidest.
Yeah. I bit off a little more than I could chew here.
Yeah, and buying a studio in the summer is not great. Like, that's when
Yeah,
things go
it's
down,
slow. Mhm.
members drop down because they're traveling. So it was definitely a challenging few months to kind of figure things out. The clients were super supportive. I think everyone was just grateful the studio wasn't closing, that there was
Yeah.
still a place to come. So that was kind of the momentum that kept things moving forward, is like, okay, we can still show up here. I don't think they knew that the studio might close, but that was sort of a relief. Like, okay, we're still
Yeah.
here. There's this woman running the space. She seems nice. I didn't know many of the Pilates clients at all because I was mostly a yoga student and teacher. So
Yeah.
learning that, getting to know them and everything. But I kind of was status quo to the best
Okay.
of my ability in the
It
beginning.
was taken pretty well by the
Yeah.
instructors and by
Oh,
the
yeah.
clients for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, if the business was going to close, was the business profitable?
They were not
They were not
much
profitable.
breaking even, a little bit of
Okay.
profit that
And
last.
did you know that going into the business when you bought it?
I did, yeah. I mean, I could
Okay.
tell enough from the financials that they were struggling, especially, obviously through COVID. And you could see that things were just starting to kind of pick
Come
back
back.
up in the beginning
Okay.
of 2022. But honestly, I also didn't know anything about what other studios were doing,
Right.
And then at that point in time, I was in Facebook groups with other yoga studio owners, and sadly, as you know, a lot of especially yoga studios are not profitable. A lot of owners work for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, 70, 80 hours a week for
Yeah.
free. So,
Yeah.
I was learning at that point in time, a couple months into it, like, okay, this is actually sadly the norm for most studio owners. And that's when I started to
And
know that
did you think like, oh, this is just what the industry is? Or did you think this
yeah.
cannot be what the industry
Yeah,
is?
and that's what I started to realize is, like, this is what the industry is, but it does not have to be this way,
Okay.
especially with yoga, we're supposed to be warm and fuzzy, and yoga should be available to all, and yes, I do believe that it should
Hmm.
be, but there's different ways to make that happen rather than
Hmm.
business losing money. I mean, who else would run a business for free and would make no profit and think that that's okay?
Entrepreneurs,
Yeah, well,
entrepreneurs,
yeah, entrepreneurs, but
entrepreneurs. They're
I
the
just
people
started
that leave a full-time salaried position to work twice as much and
yeah,
make half as much.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
yes.
that's true, that's true.
Yeah.
But I just felt like I was starting to realize as I headed further into 2022 that there had to be something that it had to be different. Like I saw the studio start to grow, membership was slowly increasing, and that was and I'm sure you saw this with your studio, that was like the, "Oh my god, COVID is over, we can leave our house," kind of
Mhm.
thing, like, it was a good year, people were really coming in, they were craving that community and that connection, and so when I saw things start to get better, I was like, "Okay, this feels like something could really blossom if
Yeah.
we kept moving in the right direction." But I was also had no idea what I was doing.
Like green. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And so you get there, it's not really profitable, but they're breaking even. Are you able to pull a salary, like pay yourself something when you at least take over the business or not
no,
really?
no,
Okay.
and I was trying to repay, the money that we took money out of our own personal
Like
accounts.
technically you're paying yourself back, basically.
Yeah, that was all
Yeah.
I was trying to do in the beginning was just to pay back what we invested and some money that I borrowed. um,
Okay.
to be and then see if I could eventually make something, but
Make a salary. Yeah.
I didn't pay
Okay.
myself anything for a long time.
Yeah. Which is a lot like business owners.
Mm,
And sometimes in those Facebook groups too, I mean, I'm in all of them as well, but people also come from a place of like it's wrong if you're doing it another way, which is
yeah,
is really bizarre. And again, I think we talk about this a lot as well. It's also a mindset
yeah,
around things, right? And
yeah,
people just have to realize like it's different, right? And if you're choosing not to change, you're choosing to stay the same, right?
yeah.
So okay, so you buy, it's breaking even, you're paying yourself back, like that's the plan. When is it that you decide you're gonna kind of start your rebrand to make it really like your own at this point?
Yeah, so that's when I started to so it was later in 2022, early 2023, I started to realize there was this coaching world out there. There were people that had done this before and were helping other
Hmm.
people. So I started to explore that, and I worked with a consultant for a period of time and really focused on the yoga programs. So she was a previous studio owner. Actually works for Mitch McGivney now.
Yeah,
So I worked
Kristen, she's great.
yeah, Kristen's
Yeah.
amazing. She was a huge asset to me and just helped put things in line. We revamped my
Hmm.
pricing, we put some systems in place, just started to like pull everything together and move forward in a better, more organized fashion. I started to drop some, we used to have TRX, and we used to have
Mhm.
those, they're called just something different for every studio, the spring walls
Mhm.
in our yoga room. I got rid of those. I started to just streamline what we offered and said,
Mhm.
we have yoga and it's only
Yep.
yoga in the yoga room. We have these Pilates reformer machines, and we offer aerial too. So
Mhm.
that also helped to just sort of narrow what we were offering so we could appeal to a client that was looking for those
Very
things,
specific.
at least one of those things. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is like a legit job. This could be a legit
Mhm.
job, and this is a legit industry that, especially as a female, that could really be something, could be a business that could help support my family, could help pay
Yeah.
for my daughter to go to college. And that was when my husband was like, "Oh, like, you're now slowly starting to replace what you were making before," which was minimal when I've always worked part-time, but that was slowly starting to be replaced. And I started to feel like I was ready to rebrand. I was heading into like 9 months of ownership, I think, when I hired Kristen, maybe a little bit
Which
less.
is really good like a lot of
Yeah.
people wait so long,
I
right?
wish
So
I
I
had
think that
hired her
that's
from day one. Like, I wish I
right.
had a coach the day I bought the business. I think about how
So
much would have saved me.
I mean, but better than waiting 5
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, and
And
when people say like the, I mean, the boutique fitness, which is what we are, boutique
yeah.
fitness wellness is like a $50 billion a year industry. Like
Yeah.
it's not
No.
chump change, right?
Yeah.
There's entire private equity firms that own
Yeah.
an umbrella of like Club Pilates and Rumble and like all F45. Like, so
Yeah.
it's worth something, for
Yeah.
sure.
Which I didn't really
So
know. I just
I
kind of thought
know.
of this as this small little studio that was just nothing. Like, I didn't see
Yeah.
how we fit into a bigger picture.
That's why people rudely, I say, talk about it like as it's a hobby. Oh, how's your little
Yeah.
hobby doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and
Here's
there's
my
some
middle
people
finger.
that own studios that it is a hobby.
That
They're
they
not
are. Yeah.
needing
It could be.
financials. Yeah. Or they
But
own
it's
the
not
building and
necessary.
there's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're working with Kristen, you're
Mhm.
deciding to do a rebrand. In that time period, what are you realizing? Like, oh shit, there's a whole lot more going
Mhm.
on, or that I should know going on? Was it like, oh shit, or oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity for me? Like,
Yeah.
which mindset did you
Yep.
have?
There was so much opportunity, and I could see
Great.
more and more how much growth potential there was in the
Mm-hmm.
studio. I mean, we are a small studio at the time, especially we only had 4 Pilates machines. We have 6 now. But we have a small yoga room. We max out at, I mean, I could squeeze 22 in there. We like to be around 18 to 20. So we're not a big space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but classes were starting to get bigger. We were slowly getting more members, and I was learning more about the financials behind the business, like reoccurring revenue with
Mm-hmm.
memberships. I used to think class packages were better. I mean, like, that was how naive I was. I didn't
But
understand.
I
Yeah.
don't think
Why
that's
would
naive. I think that's very common.
yeah.
Very
Well, I was
common.
like,
And
why would I want someone to buy a membership and come 20
it's
times
less
a month for 10, whatever. So that's one of the things that Kristen really helped me with, was like boosting the recurring revenue. How can we get more memberships? How can we restructure the pricing so it's really clear with what a client sees when they come to our website?
yeah.
And she helped me through the whole rebranding process, like how to get that message out to the clients. I redid the website, worked with Connie from Pixality. I also learned too that there was this industry of people that helped each other. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there was a woman, Connie, who that's all she does is design websites for boutique fitness
Yeah.
studios. I was like, oh my God, like, and it's very small. They all know each other and recommend each other, which was awesome. And a lot of women, which I really loved.
Yeah.
Um, so started to feel slowly that I was becoming a part of something just bigger than just
Yeah.
a studio in Glen Ellyn.
Yeah. And all of these women, Connie, who's going to be on the podcast in a month or so, is a female business owner. She
Yes.
owns her own business. Like Kristen owned her own business, right? Like they own their own businesses. So in the same time, they're also business owners. They understand what we're all going through. And like Connie has handful of children. And so like, it's the same thing. So so actually it's testament to how well you've done in your business that you were already seeking out this kind of like mentorship early on in the process, right?
Well,
So
it's lonely. It's
it's
you.
very
You
lonely.
work with a lot of people, yes, on a day-to-day basis. I have amazing teachers and I have amazing clients, but at the end of the day, it's me. Like,
Yeah.
who is the one if the, fire alarm goes off or the roofers hit a pipe and the wall starts to leak, which happened. Like, that's me
Yeah.
that someone calls, and it's lonely. So I think it started to feel good to seek out support and be a part of
These
something
other
bigger and
communities.
people that were
Yeah.
cheering you on. I mean,
Mhm.
both Kristen and Connie were amazing through the rebranding, and I also worked with a local graphic designer that helped with my logo and everything, she's also a female business owner. So it started to feel like I was supported by other
Yeah.
people. Really nice.
Yeah. I interviewed someone recently that she was describing these kind of feelings. And she's just like, we don't have coworkers. She's like,
Mm-mm.
yes, I work with people. Yes, they're friendly. Yes, I like them. But in the end, I'm their boss. I
Yeah,
sign their paycheck. And so we don't really have coworkers. Right. And so it's a different dynamic, which, I think is why having some sort of community that are like-minded in that way is very helpful,
yeah,
to have
yeah.
those discussions. So, okay. So
Um,
when does balance become balance?
so I rebranded in October of 2023. We launched the
Okay.
name, I think October 1st. People knew it was coming. I was pretty proud of my
So
marketing.
almost just like a year ago, just over a year
Yeah,
ago.
it was, yeah. So we
Okay.
had an open house, and it was a celebration. We did a members only event the night before. We did the ribbon cutting, all of that fanfare, and had free classes all day. And then that's really, I mean, I was a year and a half into studio ownership, and that was when the studio started to feel like mine. I painted, we did a new mural, we had new logo. I had a photographer come and take new pictures. It was new website, obviously. That was when I was like, okay, this is mine. And
Mhm.
now it's what happens,
You're putting your
moving forward.
fingerprint on it, right?
Yeah.
And your
Yeah.
sense. So let's talk a little bit about what the last, year or 18 months has been, right? So what kind of growth have you seen it in balance since you took over?
I should have looked at my numbers before this call, but I would say that we're probably loosely off the top of my head, you would probably be able to answer this more than I have. I think I'm 3 times revenue from when I bought it from the previous owners.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm making 3 times the
Well,
amount
but
of money.
that's in growth stage, right? When we're in growth
Yeah,
stage,
yeah,
we have lower profit,
yes,
but so you're about 3 times revenue in a year, like 2 years. So basically just
2 and
over
a
two
half, yeah.
years. Yeah.
I'm at 2
Just
and a
over
half.
2 years,
Yeah.
right? So you're 3 times the revenue in 2.5 years. And now you are pulling a salary,
Yes.
right?
Now I pay
So,
myself. I'm
yeah,
file an S corp for my taxes, and I run
which is
payroll.
great, which means that not only are you generating enough revenue, but you're also paying yourself enough to qualify to be an S corp.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a great thing. And so while it may not be the revenue, the salary that you want, which is
Not for
fine.
80 hours a week, no.
Yeah. And that's where it comes. Like that's where we can start to look at and say, like, okay, what would you rather have now? Like your time back or more salary, right? Because usually one comes first,
Yeah.
right? So like if you're like, well, I need, and I'm saying that in quotes, like financially, I need to make $25,000 more, then that might require you to stay in the business a little
Yeah.
bit more, right? If you're like, okay, so I can do without the $20,000. So what's more valuable to me is to get my time back first, stabilize, right? Because business is like that. It's like up, 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 plateau, up,
Yeah.
up, 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 and you have to do it that way, or your infrastructure will crumble, and
Yeah.
you being part of your infrastructure. So, I mean, the fact that so even a year after you bought the business, you had already
Probably a
were
year after.
doing more
Yeah.
than break even.
Probably double, I
Yeah,
think, if I remember correctly, or 1.5.
which is amazing.
Yeah,
50% year
when
over
I
year
say it out
growth.
loud, it is, yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So most businesses in their first year lose money.
Yeah,
Like to break even in your first year is success to break
yeah.
even. You
It was
doubled your revenue. And so again, it's growth. As high achievers, we want things yesterday. So if we're not hitting all of the benchmarks, we feel like we're
yeah,
failing.
yeah.
Okay, so you rebrand October 2023. What has the last 12 months been like for you? Like what has been the biggest kind of maybe roadblocks or challenges in the last year? And then we can talk a little bit about some of your wins because they've been plentiful as well.
Yeah. I mean, the rebrand was a huge undertaking. It was more than I
Mhm.
ever imagined, and I still feel like to this day, honestly, I'm still changing my name in some obscure place that I didn't realize it was still
Right.
called Mindful Movements or some piece of mail arrives. That was a huge undertaking, but it was also amazing. It was such a great experience. My family was really involved with it too, and it was awesome. Then it was sort of like move forward. I stopped working with Kristen and we worked together through the rebranding and a little bit after that. And the yoga program was sort of moving forward. We had more members, we were growing, new clients coming through the door. And that's when I started to turn attention to the Pilates program. The time we had 4 reformers, every class was waitlisted. I didn't
Mhm.
have enough teachers. And I knew, just in general, the industry, Pilates is so popular. And I knew that that's where the next like focus on the studio needed to be. Pilates has always been at the time, Pilates was always the bigger revenue generator for the
Mhm.
studio. They're now equal. Yoga and Pilates are equal, which was a huge stepping,
Amazing.
yeah, for us to get to. But it's also the most expensive. The machines are
Mhm.
expensive. You have to maintain them. Um, Pilates teachers, all of my teachers I think all 3 of my teachers have over 20 years of experience, or at least 15.
Wow, that's
One of
amazing.
them is also a yoga teacher. So they actually 2 of them are. So they all have incredible credentials, and they're, top in their industry. And as you know, there's not I don't know where all the Pilates teachers are, but there's not enough of them. They're in very high demand.
Like, where's Waldo? Where
Yeah,
are all the
I
Pilates
don't know where
teachers?
they are. Like, I saw some crazy statistic about how many Pilates teachers there are, and I'm like, "Well, where are they?" Because
Where are they? Because I don't see any of
I don't
them.
have any.
Yeah.
So, that was I finally hired another teacher. I used to have 2, now I have 3. Um, but, they're compensated well, as they should be. They work
Mhm.
a lot. So it's the most expensive, um, asset or revenue
Mhm.
generator of my studio. So I know I needed to change something. I needed to get more classes on the schedule. I was turning clients away because I didn't have anywhere to put them.
Space.
Um, so I think if I'm remembering correctly, you may remember this. I think that's when shortly after that is when I started talking. I somehow stumbled upon your podcast through somebody. I don't know if it was Connie from Pixality. I don't know. So I started listening to your podcast. Um, and then eventually at some point in time last year, I don't really remember when, to be honest. I started working with you maybe in like March, I think.
It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, it was, might
February,
have been
maybe?
before that. It was probably
Yeah.
February. Yeah.
2020, so that was 2024, right?
Yeah, the beginning of 2024. You
Yeah,
had
so I
just
started.
recently, because some of your correspondence still said like formerly,
Yeah,
so it was
yeah,
like pretty recent after your
yeah,
rebrand. So it's probably just a couple months after that. Yeah.
yeah. So I knew I needed someone that had that Pilates knowledge. And Kristen was great, but her biggest focus was yoga. That was what she knew. So I wanted someone that could help me grow the Pilates program and figure out how to fix the problem that I had with
Mhm.
the program. So that's when I started working with you first in your Fit Biz program, and then I moved into Inner Circle and later in the year, just a couple months ago,
Yeah.
because I knew that I needed to do something and I didn't know what to do. Like, because a lot of Pilates studios have all of the same problems that I have. They don't have enough teachers, they don't have enough classes on the schedule. And experienced Pilates teachers, they don't want to teach evenings and weekends,
I know.
understandably so. So I needed that funnel. So that's when we started working together. That was my biggest goal when I started working with you, is how do I fix this Pilates
Mhm.
program challenge that I have.
Yeah. And now it's, really on the up and up,
Yeah, we
you were
knocked
able
down
to
a
bring
wall.
in two
Yeah, we
more
have 2
reformers,
more reformers, so we're still staying small, which is important to me.
which is 6, which is still
Still a
great.
small group class. And I'm hosting a Pilates teacher training program. I have 5 people total, including myself, going through the training program. 2 are my yoga teachers. So there's now potential, a huge amount of potential, to expand our class program and start to offer more Pilates classes, which is huge.
Gonna
Like,
be great.
I never thought I would see where we are right now. We had an open house this past weekend, and we had 6 classes on the schedule for Pilates. All were full, and over 60% of the people that came to those classes bought packages to work with our apprentices, which I always think is a better
Amazing.
term, but the teachers in training. So we're already
Yeah.
seeing new people able to experience Pilates, which is amazing.
That's so great. It's
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah.
So, what would you say you're most proud of in 2024?
I mean, I honestly think that's one of them. I remember when I first started talking to you and you said to me, "You need to become a Pilates teacher." And I like laughed. I was like, "A, I can't teach Pilates. B, how in the world, I
Am I
mean,
gonna take it
how in
on?
the world am I going to do this?" Because Pilates programs are minimum 500 hours, right? Like
Or
I
a
don't have
lot.
500 extra hours in my life. But now I'm going through it. But I remember you saying that to me and I was like, I cannot. I
Yeah.
cannot do that. That's
I
impossible.
can't take it on.
No,
Yeah.
that was, 6, 9 months ago or something that you said that to me, and now I'm doing it. I don't really know how, but I am, and to see those women that are going through the training program with me, to see them this past weekend teaching those classes. I think we're in our 9th week of the training, which is not long when you think about it, and then they taught a group class, and then people wanted to come back for
Yeah.
more, and it was the first time that I felt like the Pilates program could grow and we could offer it to more people. That was the thing I hated every time I would answer the phone and someone
I
would call
know.
and say, "Oh, I really want to start Pilates, but I can't get into any of your classes." Yeah, they're all waitlisted. I'm sorry. Well, can I
Yeah.
do privates? I don't have a teacher for you.
Right.
I was saying no all the time to people, which sucks when people
It
want
feels
to
really bad. Yeah.
start to do something for themselves and you can't help them.
Yeah. And that was really why I was like, I think you need to go through the training, less because I was like, oh, you have to be a Pilates instructor to own a Pilates studio. I don't believe that. You were just so pigeonholed and you were beholden to
Mhm.
like the less than handful of teachers that you have. Not to say that they were taking advantage of it, but you were at the ceiling, right?
Yeah,
And so the idea was that, as a yoga teacher, it's not like you're teaching 50 classes on the schedule, but if you
no,
became a Pilates instructor, if there's an emergency, you could step in. If
yeah,
someone accidentally is going to the emergency room, which knock on wood does not happen anymore, but it also gives you an opportunity to help with your messaging,
yeah,
help with, it was more just a chance of like, let's go through the program so that you can understand like
yeah.
how to also quality because that was the other issue you were having. Like you were like, how can I quality control people? I don't feel right saying it to someone if I'm not a
A
teacher,
teacher, yeah.
right?
And even
So
just to get someone started, even just to do
yeah,
private sessions with someone to move them into group classes, like, I can do that now. I can get them on
for
the
sure.
machine and teach the beginner repertoire and get them started.
Yeah. You can audition
Yeah,
instructors now with more confidence.
yes,
So I think that, and it is a lot. Like it's not a low barrier to entry to become a Pilates instructor, at least when you're going through the full
yeah,
apparatus work,
yeah,
the
which
full
thankfully I'm
contemporary
only
one.
doing mat and reformer right now, but I eventually wanna go
It's a
on
lot.
to others, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the most surprising thing in running a business for the last just over like 2 years? What was the most surprising thing to you that you were like, I definitely never thought that was going to be part of my roles and responsibilities?
I mean, I think because we have a brick and mortar space, obviously, we're open 7 days a week. We only have classes on Sunday mornings and just yoga, but it's always there. It's always in the back of my head. Even, when we're closed, there's just is just always present. As much as I've gotten better about not checking my email, not passing out my phone number, it's just always this kind of thing in the back of my head that something I have to think about, or it's just always there. And I don't, when you're working for someone else, I mean, yeah, I cared. I was always a great employee. I always worked my hardest, but I could always separate myself
You
from,
go home and you go at the end of the day.
yeah. And
No
even if,
one's calling you if the building's burning down.
no. So I
Yeah.
think that's, and like I said before, it's lonely. I think that was surprising to me too. I was like, well, I work with all these people. Like,
Mhm.
why would it feel so isolating sometimes, especially when you have to make decisions that everyone doesn't agree with? I said that to
Yeah.
my teachers, like, I know you don't agree with everything I do, and that's okay. It's my choice. I chose to buy the business. But I always do everything for the benefit of the studio. But it's hard to make decisions when you know that people are looking at you saying, "Why is she doing that? That seems stupid." And why
Mhm.
would they know? They don't see everything on the back end like a business owner does.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think you've learned in terms of like, going through some business training and some mentorship? Like, what were some things that you learned that you were able to implement in your business that you saw drastic changes from? Like that you were really like, oh, had I not done this, I would still kind of be like a chicken with my head cut off. And I'm
Yeah.
glad that I learned it.
Well, the year that I rebranded that fall, I hired my first admin role.
Hmm.
The studio had never, I mean, it had been in the beginning, I think they had some front desk staff, but it had been a while since they'd had, usually the teachers, arrived and they
Check
checked
people in and
clients
stuff.
in.
Yeah.
We didn't have anyone at the front desk. And it was me for a lot in the beginning because I wanted to just be present. And the teachers were used to doing it on their own. And it was fine. It wasn't like it wasn't working, but it wasn't also giving the opportunity when a new client walked out of
Hmm.
class to say, "Oh, how was your experience? Are you booked for your next class? Can I tell you about our membership discounts? You're at the end of your trial." Like, there was no ability to follow up. So, I don't remember, I think it must have been Kristen that said, "You gotta hire somebody, like, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
So I hired a part-time admin person who also is a yoga teacher, and she's now one of my yoga teachers going through the Pilates teacher training program, and she works more for me. So that was a huge step. It was like my first hire that wasn't a teacher.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't even remember now what your question was.
Like, what is that?
Funny.
What was that basically? You're like, oh, I'm glad that I
Yeah.
learned how to do this, and I'm glad that
Yes.
I took the leap because it has paid off in the
Yes, it
end.
paid off, and I have 2 admins now. So I
Great.
think I just thought in the beginning, I was naive, like, "Why do I need someone there? Like, that doesn't really matter." And I started to see that, like, a dentist office doesn't run without a front desk person, so, like, why would my business run without a front desk
It's
person?
so true.
It just became, those were some of the things, hiring admin, learning the benefits of recurring revenue for your
Mhm.
members. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, gosh, there's so many things that I've learned. And I think I've talked to you about this countless times. There's so much personal work that goes into being a business owner. I mean, I go to therapy. I'm a proud believer of therapy. And I
So
feel
am
like
I. We all do. We all
that's
do.
what we talk about when I go to therapy, is running a business. I mean, God, your boundaries get pushed every single day, and I'm not
Mhm.
really great at pushing back. So I think I've learned to be more firm in my
Mhm.
boundaries. Um, I think I've learned I'm not great. You say this too, recovering perfectionist. I'm slowly learning how to let go of things that maybe aren't as important, even if deep down they still, I my
Right.
teachers laugh. I like the yoga blankets folded just way. I like the bolsters put away just way. So I tried to learn how to let go of the stuff that will make you crazy if that's all
Yeah.
that you focus on day in and day out. I'm
Yeah.
definitely not cured in that respect, but I'm better.
Yeah. The last person I interviewed, someone from the FitBiz group for the podcast earlier today, and she was saying the same thing. She was just like, when you're a business owner, a small business owner, it's like holding up a mirror because you
Yeah.
will really see all of the trait, because you just get poked and poked and poked in every which way from
Yeah.
Sunday, and it really is. And I've been a bit of an advocate of going to therapy too, because it is very much if we don't have self-awareness,
Yeah.
right? How then it's sometimes like we become reactive to things and we're not even aware of how we are becoming, I don't want to say becoming the problem, but how we are
Yeah.
putting fuel to the fire of the problem, right? And we take things so personally, right? So like if someone didn't fold and I'm the same as you, like if somebody doesn't fold the blanket right, like in your head, you might be telling yourself, well, this person's giving me the F you, like they just don't fucking care. And probably not, but that's a story we tell ourselves in our head, right? Or that person, rolls their eyes in a meeting and immediately you're like, do they think I'm a terrible person? Why are they rolling
Yeah.
their eyes at me? Do they think I'm stupid? But meanwhile, they could have had something in their eye. Like it's just a way that we go into this spiral most of the time because we're really high achieving women.
Yeah.
And that's what's made us successful,
Yeah. Yeah, it
right?
is. Some of those traits are what got me to where the studio is now and where it might be.
Absolutely. But it will
But
also be our right? Did they say like the kryptonite? Like it could also be our Achilles heel if we don't learn how to put it
yeah.
in check.
Yeah. And I think you said this once too, when you hire people, especially an admin person, like if something isn't working or if they're making mistakes, it's probably, my fault that it's happening because I didn't train them
Mhm.
properly. And I've really taken that to heart with especially my admin person that I work with really closely. We're at the studio a lot at the same time. And, we're totally different personalities. Like she laughs at me at how different we are, but her strengths balance out, my
Totally.
strengths. So we really come to the table with great strengths, but I've had to learn to be like, okay, something didn't go the way I wanted to. And I have to stop and think, well, I probably didn't tell her that. Like she can't read my mind.
You can't. It would be fabulous if
Yeah.
everybody
She's
could,
getting close.
maybe, but it's not realistic. It
And
really
no
isn't.
one, and no one, we talked about this in
No
Miami the
one's
other.
going to do it like you.
And no one is gonna care the way you do, and that's
No,
okay. It's my
it's okay.
business. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, they go home. Like, it's
Yeah.
not their they show up and get paid no matter what. That is not always the same for the owner.
Yeah. It's totally true. And I really do believe those kind of mindset things are that's really the icing on the cake,
Yeah.
right? Because you can learn the strategy, you can learn the system, but if
Mm.
in your head, your nervous system is always going crazy because you have all of these unrealistic expectations or thoughts about who you are, and you're so enmeshed in your business, it's not fun and it's not sustainable,
No.
right?
No. No.
So the strategies are important.
Yeah.
And really to get to the other side, we really kind of have to like work on our mindset
Yeah. I always think of
also.
the 2 things, you say this a lot, is feelings are not facts.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, and, the idea of we're not responsible for another person's reaction, emotional reaction. I think that's
Emotional reaction. Yeah. I am not responsible for another, I say adult. I'm not responsible
adult.
for another
Yeah.
adult's emotional reaction. So
Yeah.
like if I have a 6-year-old, like I could be responsible for there, but everyone we work with is an adult,
Yeah.
and their reaction, which is so many of us are feeling based individuals. It's why we're good at what we do for a living, right? Which is teach mindful movement. And it's really hard for us because we are like, oh, if we say that, we're going to make them feel bad. And I don't want people to feel bad because I don't know how to sit in that emotion and I don't know what to do. And so it's like this whole thing of, as long as I'm being clear and kind and I'm not being an a-hole when I tell them something,
Yeah.
if they react, like their reaction is like that, their own experience,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not, I even do this with my kids now. Like my son freaked out yesterday because he's in college. He's 19 years old. And apparently they won't let him register because he's missing a vaccine of some sort. And he was freaking out over the phone. He's like, I can't believe this. I guess I'm not going to school next semester. I guess you're spending all this money for nothing. And I was just like, and what's the problem though, Derek? And he's like, well, I don't have this meningio, and he couldn't say it. So he was like the men cockle something. I don't know. And I was like, listen, you can go to CVS to get that. And he's like,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. And I'm like, okay. Like the
Yeah.
old me would have just been like, But then I was like, this is the first I'm hearing of this. I had no idea that you were missing that vaccine. And then I went to look and I'm like, oh, you are missing that vaccine. You were supposed to get it when you were 18. I don't know why you're just finding out about this now, but guess what? You can go to the CVS
And get it.
and get it. And he was like, "Ah," and I was like, okay.
Yeah, but
So
it's hard
it's,
not to take
it is
things.
hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, especially when you're in all this other muck,
Yeah.
right? Like you're doing all this other stuff. So your fuse is very short. But I mean, I will tell you, I work with a lot of business owners. I've been in this industry for a very long time. You are going to be very successful in balance. You are the exact kind of person that I know that if you continue to work on like your mindset and like not take things personally, which is really hard to do initially, but
Yeah.
you have all the amazing attributes of having a clear vision, being an action taker, um, recognizing when it's like, okay, maybe there is another way to do this, right? Being open to suggestion and then ultimately making the decision that's best for you, balance,
Yeah.
and your family, right? So
Yeah.
you are gonna, the fact that you kind of turn this around in 2 years is freaking unheard of. It's amazing.
Thanks.
Okay. It's
We don't celebrate
phenomenal.
ourselves enough, right?
You do not celebrate yourself enough. Most of us are just putting our foot back on the gas pedal and like, okay, where are we going in the next, exit?
Yeah.
But I want you to recognize how much, you have done for this business, and which means the community still has a really welcoming, empathetic place to come,
Yeah.
a safe space for your teachers to grow and have a career and have a place where they can come to work to be proud of. And your daughter is seeing some really
Yeah.
exemplary, role model in you. And, it's been a pleasure to watch what you've created in Balance. And I know, what do you think, what's on the horizon for 2025 for you and Balance?
Well, finish the Pilates teacher training
Mhm.
program. I have 115 or 10 hours or something of practice.
That'll go by like that, like that.
Yeah, right. I have to get those hours in. That's the biggest hurdle, and learning the intermediate repertoire. That's next. And I think that's really it. I mean, not it, but I think that's where I see more of my energy going, is focusing on this growth of the Pilates program, getting these teachers that are going through the training, you know, lined up with clients, and hopefully starting to run some beginner classes with them. I'd like to see that Pilates program grow. I'd like to see more evening and weekend classes offered. I'd like to see more yoga members. We're in a little bit of that flat phase
Plateau a little bit.
right
Mhm.
now, which I hear from a lot of other studio owners. It's a weird time. So I'd like to see more people come in and join the studio to kind of get us to that next growth period. My daughter is a freshman in high school, so ultimately, I'd like to live in the warm weather again. Today is the first day of snow in Chicago, which is not my favorite thing. So there's conversations of, like, could I run the studio from somewhere else and
Mhm.
fly back once a month? I don't know, we'll see, but, I think it's just overall, I really want more people doing yoga and Pilates and coming
Yeah.
into our space. It's truly such an awesome community. I love our members. I love our teachers. It's a special place, and not enough people know that we exist, so I want more people coming in and finding us and kind of seeing, what happens when she's ready to graduate. I don't wanna stay in the Midwest. So to go somewhere, but still own the business,
Yeah.
keep the doors open.
I mean, and that's a great timeline when we talked about, like, even at the summit, we talk about like 1 year, 3 year plans, right? Like so if your goal, right, we say start with the long, right? So if your goal is like, okay, I know that I want to be able to at least have the business run without me, right?
Yeah,
That's the long goal. So what do we do working backwards? Like each step do we have to take? And those kind of things are not going to happen overnight. So if you're like, this is my goal, right? So it's really easy it's like training for a marathon. If your goal is to run 26 miles, you have like
yeah,
a coursework, right, to get to. And so having that kind of vision, even if in 3 years from now you're like, we're going to stay, but you've already set it up for that, right? So
yeah,
you can make a decision at that point. I have
yeah.
no doubt that you'll be able to be there.
I'd like to get myself not removed from the business, but more, so I'm just working more
Yeah.
normal hours.
Yeah.
So not working on a Monday is feasible.
Totally feasible. I bet you by, if we're having this exact conversation on November 21st, 2025, you
Mhm.
are not working on a Monday unless you're choosing to go in on a Monday.
That would be good. I like that idea. That's a good goal.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna mark it down and then we're gonna check it off together. So will
Then
you
yeah.
let people know where they can find you or go follow you on
Oh,
either
yeah,
Instagram or
sure.
your website?
Our website is pretty easy, balanceyogapilates.com. Instagram is Balance Glen Ellyn, and Ellen is Ellyn. We're on
Perfect.
Facebook that way too. I'm on Instagram for my own personal, but I don't really post anything there. So you'll
Well,
find everything.
we'll link all those stuff up in the show notes and people can go check out Beth and someone who bought a studio that was already in existence and still, managed to put her own, thumbprint on it and turn it around in 2 years. And it's really amazing. And I'm so grateful as we're coming up on Thanksgiving to just have had the opportunity to be like alongside you on this journey. So thank you
Well,
for that.
thank you. I wouldn't be in the Pilates teacher training program without you.
You're gonna crush it in 2025. So, all right, ladies, reach out to Beth, maybe DM her. Everyone's always likes to hear that their story maybe resonated with them.
I would love that.
And yeah, until next time, bye for now.